Phil Dixon, baseball historian, coming to you this evening to talk about some baseball history. As you know, I do this day in baseball history. And today we're looking at, what day we got here? We've got September 17th. And today is September 17th, 2025. So some of the things that we're going to look at will be close to 100 years ago when they occurred. So we want to get started. I want to give a few people just a chance to get in here. I'll go about 1 minute and then I'll just jump in. In case you haven't joined us before, we try to have a lot of fun. So if you chime in here and you hear us, go ahead and make yourself known. And if you have a question or anything like that, I'll be happy to answer that. So we're going to jump right in here right now. So let me jump over here so I can see what the first statement is. And then usually I give the something that happened this day, and then I give you my own commentary on that. And this commentary comes from my 40-some-odd years as being an African-American baseball researcher and historian. So I give a unique perspective, and one of the few perspectives that you're going to get from this type of angle. All right, so let's go to the first one. I'm going to lean over here just a little bit, and it says that August 17, 1931, Raleigh Bizz Mackey, catcher turned pitcher, took the mound and fan 11, I guess that's Metchin batters, and pitched a, pitched a 7-hitter as Hilldale, that's Hilldale Derby Daisies out of Philadelphia, won by a 6-3 score in, I think it's Metchin, New Jersey. So, okay, let's break that one down. First of all, Bizz Mackey, Raleigh Bizz Mackey is a member of the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame. I can tell you a lot about Bizz Mackey. You know, he broke in with the Indianapolis ABCs. Of course, he played a lot of winter baseball with several guys from the Kansas City area, mainly Bullet Rogan, Andy Cooper. He was on the team with Frank Duncan and those guys are playing out west in California. He eventually moved out to California. So that's Bizz Mackey. And and then Bizz Mackey has a relative. I don't know if you followed professional football during the 70s, but there was a guy named Raleigh Odoms who played for the Denver Broncos. Even went to the Super Bowl. I'm going to say World Series. Went to the Super Bowl with them, and he's a relative of Bizz Mackey. People don't know that. So there are other guys who are connected to sports. I know there's a guy named Simpson Younger who played for Oberlin College back in the 1860s. And Billy White Shoes Johnson, you probably remember that name, you follow football. He's a descendant of Simpson Younger. So this is all history that's related. I didn't know Simpson Younger's family real well. Hadn't had a chance to meet many of Bizz Mackey's family, but I do know that to be a good fact, okay? So let's see, let's jump to the next one here. Okay, this is August 17. Now that first one came from August 17, 1931. Now this one's going to come from August 17, 1902. So we're going way back. In a 5-4 win, the Fort Scott Union Blues win over Girard, Kansas. 4 outs were made on, actually they made 4 outs on 1 hit. And with the bases loaded and 1 out, the batter or the base runner thinking the ball would be uncatchable, and all of the runners took off as the bases loaded, but the outfielder caught the ball and a triple play followed. And it went first to second to third, so they got 4 outs in 1 inning, turned to triple play, and ended up winning the game. Okay, let's break this one down a little bit. Now, Fort Scott, let's see, let me jump around to Girard. Girard is the hometown of Frank Wickware, Girard, Kansas. He was born in Girard, Kansas, and I think, I don't know, I talked about this a couple of days ago because Frank Wickware seems to come up in my research quite a bit. 40-game winner with the 1910 Chicago Leland Giants, but he was born in Girard, and when he was in elementary school, the family moved to Coffeyville, Kansas, and that's where he was he grew to be a teenager and a man right there in Coffeyville, Kansas. His father worked for the Coffeyville Journal newspaper. Now, what's interesting is years ago there used to be a retired military. No, he was a retired railroad man later on, and the turnaround when you left Kansas City used to be in Coffeyville, Kansas, for the particular railroad he was working for, and he used to like to talk baseball. And this guy was probably about 80 years old. I was in my 20s at that time. I'd go over and talk to him. And one day we were having a conversation. He said, hey, when I was down in Coffeyville, he said, I used to always talk to Frank Wickware's dad. I said, oh, okay. I said, well, that's real interesting. Of course, he had his name and everything. So I said, let me see if I can find an obituary. And when I found the obituary for Frank Wickware, Frank Wickware's dad, in reading the obituary, it said that Frank Wickware was living in Schenectady, New York. And so his dad lived to be over 100 years old, but Frank was still alive. And so at that particular time, I reached out to a guy named Frank Keats. This is probably about 1989. And you got to think about it. We didn't have like this ancestry online or anything like that. You really had to work to get this information. You had to network. So you dig and you network, dig and network. And so I reached out to Frank Keats, and Frank Keats, I told him that, I said, I think Frank Wickware is buried in your town. And he said, no way. Anyway, I said, check all the cemeteries. And so he went to work, checked all the cemeteries, and I was correct. Frank Wickware was buried in Schenectady, New York. Frank Keats ended up finding where he was buried. And just last year, I was there. I carried a soil from his hometown in Girard, Kansas, where I spoke. And then I took that soil to Schenectady, New York, to the cemetery. We gave a presentation, and I sprinkled that Kansas soil over his monument there in Schenectady. And because he was a military vet and I played the trumpet, I had my trumpet with me, and I played taps for him. So I was happy to do that. So that was Frank Wickware. And also, Fort Scott, Kansas. I've been there a number of times, and I've always been invited to speak at the Gordon Parks Museum. And Gordon Parks, a famous black photographer, he wrote the, I guess it would be the book first, The Learning Tree, and that was his hometown. So I've been there a number of times. If you ever get down to Fort Scott, Kansas, you want to go to the Gordon Parks National Museum, and they have a lot of wonderful things. I may post a picture of that when I share this. So those are two things. Let me go to another one right quick. So I'm going to jump in here. This one is August 17th, 1903. Man, we're going way back. We're stuck way back before 1905. It says, John L. Sullivan, former championship boxer who always refuses to fight an African American, umpired a Philadelphia Giants versus Wilmington baseball game. Sullivan received 50% of the gate's gross receipt for umpiring the game, which was won by a 2-1 score by the Philadelphia Giants. Now, what's interesting is most people have probably heard of John L. Sullivan. I know when I was coming along, it seemed like a few boxers that you would always hear about, and John L. Sullivan was one of them that we would hear about quite a bit. I can think of a few more. Rocky Graciano, we would hear about him. But we knew more about some of the white old-time boxers, with the exception of Jack Johnson, maybe. But we didn't know much about Fred Langford. And even if you get into some of the outside of the heavyweight division, most people to this day, unless it's, Sugar Ray Robinson or modern-day Sugar Ray Leonard, most novice who aren't boxing fans don't know anybody. They might know Mike Tyson or something like Muhammad Ali, of course. But John L. Sullivan, at the time he was a champion, a national champion, he wouldn't fight black boxers. And there were some pretty good ones at that time. And but he still made a few bucks off of African Americans by umpiring games. And on occasion, Jack Johnson would umpire games. Joe Gans would umpire games. I'm trying to think who else I've run across over the years. And of course, there were a lot of baseball players who were also boxers as well. And a few days ago, I mentioned something about Army Cooper. Army Cooper, he played with the 27 Monarchs and a few other teams especially outside, the league. Played with the Denver White Elephants and teams like that. But when he was in the military, he was a boxer as well. So, but yeah, I could go on. There were several people. Wade Johnston, who played outfield for the Baltimore Black Sox, Cleveland Tate Stars. He played for the Kansas City Monarchs. He also started off as a boxer. And in my book that I produced, the Negro Baseball Leagues of Photographic History, I actually put a photograph of Wade Johnston and his boxing stance in that book. So that's it. Somebody wanted to know what this hat was. This hat, my son, actually, I have 3 kids who are HBCU graduates. In case you don't know what HBCU is, that's a historically black college and university, HBCU. And this is my son Joseph. He went to Langston University, so it's LU. And so actually, it's kind of ironic that there's 3 HBCUs that use the LU hat. So there's Langston University, and there's Lincoln University in Jefferson City. That's Lincoln University. And there's another Lincoln University, I think it's in Philadelphia, and they all go by LU. I also have a Howard graduate and a Fisk graduate. So one of these days I'll have to wear those hats on here as well. So just so happy to have 3 HBCU graduates and come out of my house. A little brief story. When I was coming out of high school, I had a full ride to play trumpet at Bishop College in Dallas, Texas, and I decided that I wanted to go for fame and fortune, so I went on the road with a rock band, and so I didn't take the offer to go to Bishop College, but I kept all the papers, and so I had my acceptance letter, I had my tuition, and the letter they said how much I would get paid per tuition, and I kept that. And I used to always tell my kids when they were growing up, don't miss the bus like I did. I ended up getting a degree from the University of Missouri, but I can tell you this, I paid for it myself. So anyway, so I hope that answers your question on the hat. Okay, let's go. Let's do 2 more. Okay, so we'll go August 17th, 1950, and it says Gene Collins tossed a no-hitter over the, I guess it's the Rainbows at Council Bluffs, Iowa, and of course the Kansas City Monarchs won 8-0. And Collins was a good hitter, lefty. He also hit 2 doubles in that game and actually won his own game. Gene Collins, his father, I knew his father real well, Donna Faye Collins. And Donna Faye was a baseball player himself. Later on, in the latter part of his career, he played softball. And so Gene was his son. Now, he had another son, too. I was trying to think of his name. I coached for like 38 years in baseball. But Gene's brother, I just can't remember his name right, his first name, but he also played for me. Matter of fact, that same year, I had Booker McDaniel's nephew on my team and also Gene Collins' brother on my team. But and this was in Kansas City, Kansas. And so, well, if I think of his name later on before this broadcast ends, I'll mention it, and maybe someone listening might reach out to him and let him know that I haven't forgotten him. So, but I used to talk to Donna Faye Collins all the time, and Donna Faye Collins, he always liked the way I managed a team because I had an old style of manage. I ran my guys a lot, and we find a good heel, and even though we were playing baseball, we run that heel, and I just make them sweat. In May, we just run like crazy in May, and when August came, July came, we were in better condition than any team, and we could just kind of cruise through. And so we didn't tire that easy. And some of these things I had learned from listening to guys who coached teams, black teams, managers who had coached Negro League teams, and talked to Buck O'Neill quite a bit about baseball tactics. One of the, I tell you, a white guy I learned a lot from. I used to be a freelance writer with the Kansas City Call, and so I'd go to the Kansas City Royals games, and I wasn't a member of the Baseball Writers Association, so I didn't get a chance to sit behind the air-conditioned glass. I had to sit in the open air booth there, and it was to like the right field side of the the big guys, the important guys booth, right? So I would sit there and it'd be some stringers out there. Used to have stringers who would, like if there was a play, before we had internet, the stringers would call local radio stations or TV station or whatever, and they give them a report, and then they just feed that information on the scores and things like that. So the stringers are out there with me. But on occasion, Hank Bauer, manager of the Baltimore Orioles, played with the Yankees, played with the Kansas City Athletics. Hank was living in Kansas City at that time, and he was doing some advanced scouting for the Yankees. And so he was at the stadium all the night, every home game, really. And Hank did not like the air conditioning. So Hank would come out and sit with us. And so, Hank would come out, and man, I would ask Hank every kind of question. So if a situation come up, I say, hey, Hank, I think he's going to do this. And Hank said, no, he's not going to do that. And I would say, why? And he would give me the strategy. And I learned a lot of baseball just sitting next to Hank Bauer. And, being young kid who collected baseball cards, actually getting a chance to sit next to Hank Bauer, man, and talk baseball, that's unforgettable. And Hank knew that I was really into baseball history. And Hank would always see me, we'd go and eat at the stadium club, or they had a little restaurant for the media room. And I'd be in there eating, and Hank would come in, and he'd always say, you still collecting that baseball dope? That was his big thing. He called it baseball dope. And you don't hear that anymore. That term, baseball dope, but that's what they used to call the baseball history and the trivia, baseball dope, and Hank Bauer. So I'm gonna give you one more. Okay, this is August 17, 1973, and it says Willie Mays hit home run number 660, the last of his major league career, off Don Gullett in the New York Mets 2-1 loss to the Cincinnati National League Reds at Shea Stadium. All right, then. I don't need to tell you much about Willie Mays. Now, unfortunately, Willie Mays was one guy I did not get a chance to meet. I met Hank Aaron. Dick Allen was one of the people I really enjoyed meeting. And of course, having a media pass first, because I used to freelance write for the Kansas City Call, and later I worked as assistant director of PR for the Kansas City Royals, and through 1990. So I had access to a lot of guys, and I was able to meet these players. This is in the 80s especially, and so I would meet these guys, and hey, I would ask them historic questions. I tell you, one guy I used to talk to all the time whenever he came through Kansas City was Frank Robinson and Elrod Hendricks. I used to talk to Elrod all the time. And but these are guys that, if you follow baseball, you might know these names. These aren't names, of players that are around today. So, but some of them end up being managers, but they were just all around good guys. I used to always talk to Gene Baker too. Gene Baker, he had played with the Cubs, played with the Kansas City Monarchs, and Gene would come through because he was an advanced scout for the Pirates. I would talk to him. Phil Rizzuto many, many times. He had played in Kansas City. Of course, most people know him with the New York Yankees. So, also talked to Lou Boudreau. How about that? Lou Boudreau, who managed Cleveland. Actually, he was managing Cleveland. Larry Doby came up in '47. So anyway, this is all good history. So anyway, Willie Mays, probably the only story I would say is that Willie Mays, I think it was last year, was supposed to be in Birmingham. That was the plan, and they were going to honor him. And of course, the Cardinals were playing the San Francisco Giants, and Willie died the night before. First, he canceled out because they didn't think he could make it, and then he passed away, and then they played the game. And to be in Birmingham that weekend, which was Willie's hometown, was one of the great honors of my baseball career. And I will always remember being there and talking and seeing people talk about the great Willie Mays. So that's about it for tonight. Let me see. I'm gonna have to move in a little closer so I can see these names. I see a guy named Thomas Pelkey, P-E-L-K-E-Y, Pelkey. Hello there, Thomas. And I see a Orca Jr. And then they said, you need hat. Thank you very much. Then there's a Lord Sam, Persian Gulf versus Abraham Gulf. Not sure what that means, but I think it means something, right? I don't know if he's calling from the Persian Gulf or what. And then, of course, there's a Keeson Renard. He says, hello. I may have your name kind of messed up, but anyway, just want to say thank you for joining in. And there's somebody named Blueberry something. Blueberry something. I can't get that. It's kind of small there, but yeah, I want to thank you guys for joining in. And this was kind of a long one tonight, so if you don't have time to listen back to it all, maybe listen to a piece of it. And just know that I'm giving you information from 1980 was when I really took the Negro League serious and began to do research. So we're talking about what, 45 years? Man, there's nobody out here. I think when I started, Jim Riley was around doing things. John Hallway was around. Robert Peterson was around. He wasn't doing much, but that was pretty much it. Wasn't a lot of guys. So I'm kind of like one of the last of those original Mohicans, right? And so I'm out here still telling the story, and it's a great story to tell about the Negro Leagues. History is really growing. So we'll keep this going, and tomorrow I'll be back talking about some things that happened on this day, which would be August the 18th. So thank you guys, and you have a good evening, and I'm going to sign out for now. So I hope this has been enjoyable. Have a nice day.